Hey there everyone, Ramesh here. Welcome to Angular 10 Spring Boot REST API example tutorial. In this tutorial, we will create a very simple single page application using Angular 10 as front end and Spring Boot as backend. We are going to use Angular 10, which is latest release of Angular as of now, and we are going to use Spring Boot to develop a REST API. So basically we are going to develop a simple full stack application using Angular as front end and Spring Boot as backend. Okay, great. Angular is a platform and framework for building single page client applications using HTML and TypeScript. As we know that Angular is written in TypeScript, hence you should have a basic understanding of TypeScript in order to work with Angular. Well, on the other hand, Spring Boot is popular to develop RESTful web services and microservices. So nowadays Spring Boot is getting more popularity, especially for developing RESTful web services and microservices. And you can use Spring Boot to quickly set up and create Spring based applications. Now let's take a look at Angular Spring Boot full stack application architecture. Well, we have Spring Boot architecture at the back end and Angular architecture at the front end. Well, let's first understand the backend architecture, that is Spring Boot application architecture. We have different components in Spring Boot application like Spring REST controller, Spring Data JPA. So Spring Data JPA is basically communicate with the database and it will perform all the database operations like basically does CRUD database operations. Okay, and Spring REST controller we create to expose REST endpoints, and we are going to use Spring MVC to develop RESTful APIs. And Spring Data JPA internal uses Hibernate as a JPA provider. Okay, and to keep it still simple in this project, I am going to use H2 database, but you are free to use any relational database. Okay, like MySQL database, Postgres, Oracle. Alright, great. So this is all about a Spring Boot architecture. So it's pretty simple. Let's take a look at Angular application architecture. So look at here, different components are involved in Angular application like view templates, components, services, and we may have our own directives and pipes, etc. So view templates are built using HTML, and this view templates represents user interfaces, and components will handle the data and it will handle the application logic basically, and services are basically used to communicate with the server using REST API. So all the common logic we keep in services so that services can be injected in any components and services can be reused. Alright, great. And services internally uses HTTP client to make a REST API call. Angular provides its own HTTP client module to make a REST API call. So this is the high level architecture of Spring Boot Angular full stack application. Alright guys, great. Now let's take a look at prerequisites for this project. So you should have a basic understanding of HTML, CSS and JavaScript, and if you are aware with JavaScript, then probably you will understand TypeScript basics easily. And you should have Spring Boot basics, and make sure that you have installed Node.js and npm on your machine. And we are going to use Visual Studio Code IDE to develop Angular application. Alright guys, great. What we will build in this tutorial, we are going to build two projects, Spring Boot backend and Angular frontend. Spring Boot backend project we create to develop and expose REST API, and Angular frontend project we develop to consume a REST API. Okay, and this is the simple user interface of this project. So I am not going to create a full stack CRUD operations in this tutorial. I am just going to demonstrate how we can combine front end and back end to make a full stack simple application. Okay, and in next tutorial I am going to create a brand new series on Angular and Spring Boot CRUD full stack application. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and let's create a Spring Boot backend application in Eclipse STS IDE, And first we'll create and expose REST API, and then we'll create Angular front-end application to consume a REST API. Alright guys, great. Let's go ahead and let's switch to the Eclipse STSID and let's create Spring Boot project. I am in Eclipse STSID now. In order to create Spring Boot project, go to the file, new, and then choose Spring Starter project. So look at here, this is a Spring Initializer user interface. Basically, Spring Initializer is integrated in STSID. We can use Spring Initializer to quickly create a Spring based application. So let's go ahead and let's give a name to the project. Let's give a name as Spring Boot backend. Alright, and type as Maven, packaging jar, Java version 8, language Java, and let's give group as net.java guides. You can give any group ID that you want, and artifact ID is going to be our application name, so let's keep as it is. Version, let's keep default version as it is, and this is the description of our project, and this is package. Let's change the package. I am going to give package name as net.javagates.springboot. Alright, once you are happy with the details, click next, and look at here, this is the Spring Boot latest release, and I am going to keep this latest release as it is. And here we are going to develop a simple REST API. For that, what I will do, I will just select Spring Web Dependency. So we use Spring Web Dependency to create a RESTful web services as well as Spring MVC web applications, and this dependency internally provides Apache Tomcat server as a default embedded server. Okay, great. Now what we will do, we will use in-memory database, that is H2 database. Let us select H2 database library. Let's go ahead and let's pick up Spring Data JPA dependency. Alright, so Spring Data JPA dependency is basically we use to reduce a boilerplate code that is required to develop a Java layer. Okay, and Spring Data JPA internally uses Hibernate framework as a JPA provider. Alright guys, once you select all the required dependencies, then hit finish. This will create a new Spring Boot project in Eclipse STSID. Alright guys, we have created a simple Spring Boot project in Eclipse STSID. Now what we'll do, we'll create a packaging structure. Right click on a package, new, and then choose package, and let's create a new package. Let's name it as model. Let's quickly create one more package. Let's name it as repository, and let's go ahead and let's create one more package. Let's name it as controller. Alright, now what we'll do, we'll create a JPA entity. Right click on model package, new, and then choose class, and let's give name as user. We're going to create a user JPA entity. Let's create few fields: private log ID, private string, first name, private string, last name, and private string email. Alright, let's keep only these fields, and let's go ahead and let's create getter setter methods to access these fields, and let's also create a constructor here. And let's create a default constructor. Alright, so this is a simple Java class. Let's make this Java class as a JPA entity by adding JPA annotations. Let's use @entity annotation and @table annotation, and let's give a name to the table. Let's say users, and let's create a primary key for this table. Let's use @id annotation, and let's give a primary key generation strategy to this primary key, and we're going to use identity as a primary key generation strategy. Now let's use @column annotation to provide a column name or to map a column to the fields. Here let's give first underscore name. Let's copy this, and similarly last underscore name. Okay, great. If you don't specify @column annotation, then by default the name of the column is the field name, and if you don't specify @table annotation, by default the name of the table is user, that is a class name. Okay, so it's pretty simple JP entity. Now let's quickly create a repository. Right click on a package, new, and create interface. Let's name it as user repository. Great. And this interface extends JPA repository. Now we'll get code operations on user entity, and let's annotate this interface with @repository annotation. Alright, now we'll get a CRUD database operations for user JP entity. Now what we'll do, we'll create a REST API. In order to create a REST API, we need to first create the controller. Right click on a controller package, new, and then choose class, and let's give a class name as user controller. Okay, and let's annotate this controller with @REST controller annotation, and also use @request mapping annotation, and let's give a path as API. Okay, and let's quickly create a simple REST API. Let's say public list of users. Let's say get users, the name of the method, and here we are going to use @get mapping annotation, and let's specify the endpoint URL like users. Alright, and here we'll inject user repository, private user repository. Alright, now simply return this dot user repository dot find all. So find all method basically returns a list of users. If you mouse over find all method, you can see here this method returns a list of users. Alright, now we have developed a simple REST endpoint, that is users, which returns a list of users to the client. Okay, that is pretty much about developing the REST API. Now what we'll do, we'll insert few records in a users table. For that, what we'll do, we'll implement command line runner interface. It provides a run method, and this run method basically executes when we deploy our application in a embedded default Tomcat server. So here what I will do, I will just auto wire or inject. So here we want to save a user object to the database, right? For that we are going to use user repository. Basically user repository offers CRUD database operations for user entity, right? Now what we'll do, we'll simply call user repository dot save method, and here we pass user object. Let's create a user like first name as Ramesh, last name as Fartare, email as ramesh@gmail.com. Let's create a few more users. Now we have created user objects and we have inserted user objects into database. Now let's go ahead and let's run our Spring Boot project and let us test the REST API. Alright, look at here, our Spring Boot project is up and running on default Tomcat server on port 8080. Now let's open our Chrome browser and let's test the REST API. The REST API is users localhost 8080/API/users. Alright, in a browser just type localhost 8080/API/users and hit enter. Yeah, here we go, we got a JSON response from the server. So these are the list of users that we got from the server. Now we have successfully created and exposed a REST endpoint. Hey guys, it's time to create an Angular application. So we are going to use Angular CLI to quickly create and set up Angular project. So if you are aware with Angular CLI, so Angular CLI is a command line interface to quickly create Angular application. So before that, make sure that you have installed Node.js and npm on your machine. So in order to install Node.js, you can just type Node.js in Google and just go to the Node.js official website, that is nodejs.org, and this is a download page, and you can go ahead and you can download a latest release of Node.js from here, and you can install Node.js on your machine. So as soon as you install Node.js, npm will also get installed. Alright, great. Now let's go ahead and let's check the version of Node.js that we have installed. So you can just type the command node-v to check the version that you have installed. So I have installed Node.js on my machine, so it says version 12.18.2. We can also use command npm-v to check the version of npm that you have installed. Alright, now once we have installed Node.js and npm, now we need to install Angular CLI. Head over to the browser and just type Angular CLI in the browser and hit enter and go to the Angular CLI official website. So this is the official website of Angular CLI, and here are the commands you can use to quickly create Angular application and the building blocks. Alright, so let's copy this command npm install -g. So we are going to install Angular CLI globally, so you can just copy whole command and you can paste it in a command prompt like this and hit enter. So I have already installed Angular CLI on my machine. So once you have installed Angular CLI, you can check the version of Angular CLI using command -version. Okay, hit enter. It's not a hyphen version, and you have to provide 2 hyphens like this and hit enter. Yeah, here we go. So you can able to see here we have installed Angular CLI 10.0.7. okay, great. So this is the latest release of Angular CLI as of now. So once you have installed Node.js and npm and Angular CLI, it's time to create Angular application. So Angular CLI provides commands which we can use to create Angular application, components, services, classes, modules, a lot of things. Okay, great. Now head over to the Angular CLI official website. So here, look at here, a couple of commands. You can use ng new followed by project name. So this command you can use to create Angular application, and you can use ng serve to start Angular application on development server. And if you want to know more about the commands, you can read the description over here. Alright guys, let's use ng new followed by project name to create Angular application. Let's head over to the command line prompt. Now here I'm going to type the command ng new and followed by the name of the project. I'm going to say Angular frontend. You can give any project name that you want, but I will give Angular frontend as a project name. hit enter. So this command will take couple of minutes to install all the necessary dependencies. So look at here, it gives option to you whether you want to add a routing to this project or not. So we are not going to use routing, this is very simple Angular project, so I'm going to say no. And look at here, it will provide option for tile sheet format. I'm going to use default, so hit enter. Now it will take a couple of minutes to install all the necessary dependencies and packages in Angular application. So once a command completes, it says package is installed successfully. Alright, now what we'll do, we'll navigate inside a project. Just type the command cd and then Angular frontend. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to use VS Code IDE to develop our Angular application. I have already installed VS Code IDE in my machine. Make sure that you have also installed Visual Store Code IDE on your machine. Now what I will do, I will open this folder inside VS Code IDE. So I'm using Windows, so I can just type the command code dot. So this will open a VS Code IDE inside this folder. Hit enter. I hope you are following the steps. So in VS Code IDE, you can see here Angular frontend. So this is our Angular application and it has a bunch of files. So we'll look into the important files a bit later. First, let's go ahead and let's run our Angular application. Go to the integrated terminal, choose new terminal, and we are going to use integrated terminal to create a component to run the Angular application, to create Angular services, TypeScript classes, etc. To run our Angular application, we are going to just use the command ng serve. Okay, hit enter. So look at here. So you visually we get this error if we have already Angular application running on port 4200. So I have already have Angular application which is running on port 4200. So I just stopped that Angular application. Now let's go and let's type the command ng serve, again hit enter. So this will take couple of seconds to to deploy Angular application in local development server. So once this command completes, it says Angular live development server is listening on localhost 4200. Let's go ahead and let's head over to the browser and let's use this URL in order to access our Angular application. In a browser, just type localhost 4200 and hit enter. So look at here, by default Angular provides some HTML. Alright, now our Angular application is up and running on port 4200. So Angular application has a lot of files. We will go through the important files. First file is package.json file. So this file basically contains dependencies and dev dependencies. Dependencies mean it contains JavaScript libraries and packages that are required to run our Angular application. And if you install any library using npm command, then this file will get updated. For example, if you install Bootstrap using npm, then that Bootstrap entry will add to this package.json file. So this is something like maven.pom.xml file where we keep all the dependencies, right? So this looks similar to that. And here are the few scripts like start, ng serve, ng build in order to build our Angular project, ng test to run test cases. So these are the few scripts. Alright, so whenever you run the command npm start, it internally call ng serve to run Angular application. So this is a package.json file. Next src folder. So all your development goes inside src folder. Within src folder we have main.ts file. So this is the main entry point of our Angular application. And look at here, main.ts file contains the code which will bootstrap app module. So this is the line of code that will bootstrap and kickstart app module, and app module internally bootstrap and kickstart app component, and app component is our root component of our Angular application. So Angular is basically a modular in nature. It means it contains modules, and each module can internally contains components, services, directives, etc. And Angular application at least have one module that is called a root module, and in our project it is called app module. Okay, so Angular application at least contains one module that is called app module. So you can create any number of modules that you want in Angular application, but Angular application at least contains one module that is root module or app module. And Angular application at least contains a component that is called app component, and this is a root component of our Angular application. Alright, great. So other files are like index.html. So this is a single file basically we are creating a single page application, right? So this is the single file that will serve in a browser. And look at here, inside a body we have app root. So this is a custom HTML tag. So in case of Angular application we call it as a selector, and this selector we defined in app component. Okay, so this is the selector. It is just like a custom HTML tag that we add to the HTML, right, in a index.html. Okay, and we have styles.css, so we can keep all the global CSS files inside this file. Alright, and we have environments folder. Inside that we have environment.ts and environment.prod.ts. so all the environment related configurations goes inside these files. And inside assets you can keep images and other static files. So these are the few important files in this Angular application. Now let's see how the control flows in Angular application. So first, main.ts file is get served, and this is the entry point of our Angular application. And inside a main.ts file you can see here app module is get bootstrapped, and this will basically bootstrap and kickstart app module. App module in turn bootstrap app component. App component basically is an Angular component, and it has a selector. So inside index.html we have used this selector to call a component. Okay, basically it will invoke component a template, and inside app component template we write all our HTML code. For example, I am going to delete all the existing HTML, and I am going to just write the HTML code like h1 tag, within h1 tag Java guides. And if you save the file and go back to the browser, and you will able to see Java guides printed on a browser. Okay, now what we will do, we will install bootstrap in our Angular application. So we are going to use bootstrap CSS framework to style our web pages. So there are a couple of ways to install bootstrap in Angular application. Either you can use CDN links directly, that is remote links to use bootstrap in Angular project, or you can use npm command to install bootstrap in Angular project, and you can just provide the path of that bootstrap file inside Angular application. So to keep it simple, I'm going to use CDN remote links to quickly use bootstrap. So for that, go to the browser and just type bootstrap for CDN link, and head over to the official website of Bootstrap, and you can find here CDN links. You can just copy this CDN link and go to the VS Code ID and go to the index.html, and inside a header section just paste it. Great, it's pretty simple. We can just use this CDN remote link to use a Bootstrap. Now in order to check whether this Bootstrap is added to our Angular project or not, for that what I will do, I will go to the app HTML file here, app.component.html file, and here I'm going to add a Bootstrap CSS class. Let's use class attribute, and then here I'm going to just use a Bootstrap CSS class that is text center. So this will align this text at a center. Let's save the file and go back to the browser, and browser will automatically refresh, and you can able to see here Java guides printed in middle of the page. It means that the Bootstrap is successfully added to our Angular application. Now it's time to create a class, TypeScript class, that is basically a model which will hold a response of a REST API. Let's go ahead and let's create TypeScript class. Let's go ahead and let's create one more integrated terminal. Go to the terminal, new. So look at here, you can have multiple integrated terminals in VS Code. So in first integrated terminal, Angular application is running, and in a second integrated terminal, I'm going to use this integrated terminal, that is second integrated terminal, to run the commands, Angular CLI commands. Now let's use the command ng g and then class, and followed by the name of the class, let's say user. So this will create a class, TypeScript class. Hit enter. So look at here, two files are get created, user.ts and user spec.ts. So if you go to the app folder, inside app folder you can see user.ts file is get created. Inside that file you can see a user class. Okay, now let's go ahead and let's add few attributes to this class. Let's say ID, its number, and let's say first name, user first name, and this is string, last name, and this is string. So here we are using TypeScript, so we can provide a type to the property here like this, email, which is also string. So this is basically the most important usage of TypeScript. So we can use type for properties in a class like this. So this is how we create a model class which will hold the response of the REST API. Now let's go ahead and let's create Angular service which will communicate with a server using REST API, and it will get the data from the REST API and it will store inside this user model class. So in order to create Angular service, just go to the integrated terminal again and just type the command ng, g for generate, s for service, and just use a name like user. So this will create user.service.ts. So this is the naming convention of Angular CLI. So look at here, two files are created. One is for regular file, and another is for test file, that is spec.ts file. Okay, so inside app folder you can see here user.service.ts file, and inside this you can see here user service class. So this class is annotated with @injectable decorator. So this decorator basically tells to the Angular that this class can be injected in any component. So we can use dependency injection feature to inject user service in any component, and component will invoke user service methods. Alright, great. And look at here, we have provided this provider at a root level, so we no need to add user service in provider section of app module here. And now we will write a REST client code inside this service, which will make a REST API call. So look at here, inside add injectable decorator, it's a property called provided in. So this will provide a user service at a root level. Basically this will inject user service at a root level in a provider section, so we no need to add user service in provider section of app module here, because Angular CLI will automatically inject or add user service provider at a root level. Okay, understood? Great. Now we are going to use HTTP client module from Angular package to call a REST API. So in order to use HTTP client to make a REST API call, we first have to import HTTP client module. Go to the app.module.ts file, and here we're going to import HTTP client module. Type import within a curly braces HTTP client module from angular/common/http. So make sure that you install this module from this package and copy this module name and go to the import section, and here we need to add this module name here. Okay, great. Now we'll head over to the user service class and we'll add HTTP client, and we'll inject HTTP client inside user service, and we'll make a REST API call. Go to the import section here. Let's type HTTP client. Let's import HTTP client module. Type import and then within a curly braces HTTP client from angular/common/http. So make sure that you import HTTP client from this package. So once we import HTTP client module, so let's go and let's inject this module inside a constructor. Just type private and then HTTP and then HTTP client. So this is how we inject HTTP client in a constructor. Alright, now let me create a property with a REST endpoint URL. Let's say private base URL, and then this is a REST endpoint that we are going to invoke inside this service using HTTP client. Okay, and just create a method here, get users, and then here the return type, let's say observables, and here we can pass the type, let's say so this REST API returns array of user objects, so I can give here user array something like this, say return this dot http, and then let's call get method, and here we are going to pass a type as user array, and to the get method we are going to pass the URL, right? So look at here, we have to use backstick here. Don't use single quote, you should use backstick in order to pass the URL, and then dollar in curly braces this dot base URL. Okay, so this is how we pass a URL as a parameter to the get method. So if you look at the documentation of get method, so get method returns observable object of HTTP response, and we can subscribe this observable in component that we'll see a bit later. It's pretty simple. So what we have done is we have just imported HTTP client module from angular/common/http package, and we have injected this HTTP client inside a constructor, and we have created get users method which returns observable object, and inside get users method we just call get method of HTTP client, and we pass the base URL. So this will invoke a REST API, and REST API will return a array of user objects, and that user object will be stored in observable object, and we subscribe to this observable object in component. Now let's go ahead and let's create a component. Let's go to the integrated terminal and just type the command ng, g for generate, c for component, followed by the name of the component. So look at here, this command created 4 files and updated 1 app module. Okay, it means that Angular CLI will automatically add this newly created component in app module in declaration section. So look at here, Angular CLI will automatically add user component to the app module automatically. We no need to explicitly add user component here. Alright, now we are good to write a logic to populate data on a template. So first of all, let's go ahead and let's inject user service inside a user component. Inside a constructor, just type private and then user service, and then use user service, and make sure that you import user service at the top. Import user service from user.service. Okay, great. Now create a property private and then users. So this will basically hold a response of the REST API. It's an array of users. Make sure that you import user model class at the top. Great. Now here we have ng on init method. So inside that we are going to call a method of user service. So here let's go ahead and let's call this dot user service and then call get users method, and get users method returns observable object, so we can subscribe to this observable object. And then here we can just pass the type like data and then array of users followed by arrow syntax, and here we are going to assign response to the users array, that is data. It's pretty simple, right? So before that, let me log the response data to the console. Great. So pretty simple user component, and inside a user component we have created users array, and this users array hold a response of REST API. Okay, it's pretty simple. Now let's head over to the template, that is user component template, and here we're gonna write HTML code to populate data on a web page. So let's go ahead and let's create a div here, and let's say class, and then let's say container. So this is the Bootstrap CSS class. Inside a container, let's create a one more div, and let's give a class attribute, and here let's use Bootstrap CSS class called, and let's go and let's create a one more div, and let's use Bootstrap CSS class like card body. So basically we are going to create a HTML table which will populate users data, and that HTML table we are creating inside a card. Okay, and let's go ahead and let's create HTML table, and then add as Bootstrap CSS classes to this table. Let's say table stripped, and then inside a table we are going to call table body. So before that we have table header, right? Let's call table header, and inside table header we define the columns, that is th, let's say id, and then first name and then last name, and then email. Okay, great. Now inside a table body we are going to use ng for directive to iterate over array of users object, and we are going to use Angular interpolation to populate users data. So basically we are going to use double curly braces to access object attributes. Let me show you how to do it. Let's create a table row and then star ng for, so this is a special directive in Angular application. So this is the inbuilt directive that is provided by Angular to loop over an array of objects, and here we pass an array like let's say let user of users, let user of users. So ng for directive, basically it will loop over an array of objects. So this is a special directive in Angular application, so which we can use to iterate over array of objects. Okay, it's pretty simple. And then we are going to just use a td tag here and then double curly braces. So this is called interpolation in Angular. Let's say user dot call id, and let me simply copy this, and let's say user dot first name, let me copy this, and let's say user dot last name, and then user dot email. So these are the property of user class. So if you look at the user class here, you can see id, first name, last name, email. So these are the properties that we are using inside a table here. Alright guys, this is pretty much about the template. Now here what I will do, I will create a h3 tag here, and let's say users list, and I'm going to display this text at center. For that I'm going to use bootstrap css class text center. Let's save the file and let's go back to the browser and let's see how it works. Make sure that Angular application is running on port 4200. Okay, great. So here you can see the error, like errors occur in template of component user component. Let's see what is the error here. Property users is private and only accessible within class user component. Okay, let's go ahead and let's remove the private here. Let's save the file, and you can able to see here the error is resolved. Alright guys, now one more step left. We have selector, right? Selector of this user component. We are going to use this selector as a custom HTML tag inside app template. So let's go to the app template here, and here we are going to add this selector as a custom HTML tag like this, and here I'm going to change the header. I'm going to say Angular 10 Spring Boot REST API example. Let's save the file and let's head over to the browser and let's see how it looks. So look at here, browser automatically refresh, and here I can able to see Angular 10 Spring Boot REST API example tutorial heading, and data is not populated in the table. Let's see what is the issue. Open developer tools and go to the console, and here we go, we got a course policy issue. Well, we usually get this kind of errors in browser because Spring Boot application is running on port 8080 and Angular application is running on port 4200. So both the applications are running on different ports. So browser will gives this error. Okay, course policy error. So in order to fix this error, what we can do is we can add course origin annotation to our Spring Boot project. Let's go to the Eclipse STS IDE and go to the user controller class, and here at the top we are going to use @cross origin annotation, and this annotation has origins attribute, and then within a double quote we have to give a URL of our Angular application. Let me copy this URL and paste it here. So make sure that you remove the slash. So the URL should looks like this: localhost:4200. Now let's go ahead and let's run our Spring Boot application. Right click on our main Spring Boot class, run as Java application, and this will run our Spring Boot application in embedded Tomcat server on port 8080. Now let's head over to the browser and let's see how it works. Let's refresh the link. Hopefully it should work. Yeah, here we go. We got a success response from the REST API, and we have populated response data on the web page. Alright guys, we have successfully implemented our Angular Spring Boot REST API example. So in this tutorial we have learned how to develop a simple full stack application using Angular 10 as front end and Spring Boot as a backend. Alright, great. I hope this video will help you guys in order to develop a single page application using Angular and Spring Boot. Alright guys, I hope you found this tutorial useful. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Whenever I will publish such videos, you will get notified. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.